Awesome. We have Bar Katsir today with us. He will be our host. Bar.
Hi, Renee. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for putting the time and effort to join me here today. Today, I'm going to spend 1 hour with you to talk about how to bulletproof your EDL. We're going to talk about motivation, configuration, best practices, and of course, how to continue being successful. Thank you so much for joining in today. Feel free to reach out and ask questions in the Q&A. If you also want to ask the questions in your own voice, you're most welcome. Please reach out via the chat to the panelists that will unmute you. Do note, however, as Vanessa said, the meeting is recorded and will be uploaded. My name is Bar. Bar Katsir. I'm a product manager for XSOAR. Started in satellite operations, geodatabases, transitioned into software as a QA engineer on a database activity monitoring product, and joined the early stages of the demisted startup that was to be acquired by Palo Alto Network. Grew up to be to recruit and lead a team of software developers, studied computer science and statistics, and also did masters in law, intellectual property. On a personal note, I'm happily married, father of a 1-month-old baby boy. So if I sometimes seem tired or confused, this is probably the reason. So let's jump into the agenda. We're going to talk today what is an EDL, the benefits and the requirements from an XSOAR perspective. Most of the time, we're going to do a demo. We're going to talk about the packs to be used in the marketplace. How do I get indicators of compromise? How do I manage them? The configuration of the EDL, the generic export indicator service pack. And then we're going to talk a little bit, hopefully a lot, about Bulletproof, how to prevent disasters from happening in your organizations. We have a few examples that were happening in our current customers' portfolio before they were our customers. Of course, we're going to leave time for Q&A. Okay, so what's in it for all of the distinguished list of attendees in this webinar? We're going to talk about the following best practices to ensure smooth and successful EDL process to save time and effort, to reduce risk of false positive, and of course improve the mean time to response, both of incidents closure, but also when preventing incidents from happening. Quick zoom pool to start. Are you using an EDL in your organization today? Okay. Can we show the results? So we see that the majority of our participants are using EDL today, which is great. I'm going to try and skip the basic and just give them in a few sentences, so everyone can be lined up on the basics. And happy to take the conversation forward with you as fast as possible. So what is an EDL? An external dynamic list. How does it look like? Quite a few examples. I would say most, at least, and known ones from my side is the emerging threats, which gather suspicious or malicious IPs from various resources. And as you can see, it's, I would say, not such a complicated file, right? TXT file with a lot of records that you want to do something with them. There are many EDL recommendations from Reddit, how to use it in our organization in order to secure themselves, and also how to configure them in the next generation firewall. But that's, of course, not the only use case. You can configure the EDL in ITSM, in EDRs, in SIEM, and you can load it up into to use EDLs in AWS and GCP and Microsoft Azure environments. It's all over the World Wide Web. And of course, XSOAR supports it as well to host the EDL on XSOAR. So we're saving you an AJ remote file server to do so. And let's move forward. The benefits of hosting your EDL on your XSOAR is that we are auto-digesting and updating the allow and the block list. It doesn't have to be a TXT file that you open with Nano or Vim, God forbid. We're gonna manage it for you. You can update it across multiple systems, right? You can configure the EDL within XSOAR to be read by multiple different systems. And you're gonna have a single source of truth. Whenever you change an indicator within XSOAR, of course, there is a history, there is timeline. You can know which analyst changed which indicator when, of course, provide a reason, and you have one place where you manage all of your threat intel information. For the firewall users of EDL, one of the sheer benefits is that when using EDLs to configure your security policies, upon changes in the EDL addition or deletion of entities, you do not need to commit the firewall instance in order for the changes to take place. As you know, firewall commit is a hard process. It takes a lot of time and of course affects the organization. So hardware and license requirements from XSOAR perspective, that's an easy one. All you need is XSOAR. Of course, there are tweaks and perks if you want to create extremely big EDLs, but we're going to cover that in the FAQ. Okay, let's dive right into the demo. We're going to talk about the installation, which packs do I use, how am I ingesting the IOCs, the different ways to do that, how do I recommend tagging them, setting up an EDL export indicator service instance, and showing a little bit other items that I suggest doing to prevent disasters. Okay, so from the installation perspective, there are a few different ways. One way for the customers that have their XSOAR open to the world, just go into the marketplace, and all you need to do is download the export indicator service pack, which is installed. I also the expert indicator service generic pack. You can just install it. I'm gonna update it in a minute. But as of 6.8, which is the version that I'm on, just to show you, we have added a new cool feature that I suggest you looking at it as well. And that would be the ability to subscribe or unsubscribe to content pack. What does it mean? It means that whenever there is a version history update, you can get the release notes either by mail or by Slack message per the configuration that you have in your notifications screen. Of course, you can dictate how many times a day do you want to get the email at what hour. So just something small that I wanted to take note. I'm gonna also be installing the PanOS pack. I've taken into consideration which pack should I demo the EDL with, but as I saw, our highest attach rate to products that supports EDL out of the box and have good documentation, the PanOS wins, one of each four, of which four customers have PanOS installed. So that's one option. In order to, the other option to install a pack for the air-gapped customers, go to the marketplace tab at the XSOAR dev site, and then you can just search for the pack, download it with dependencies. I'm going to have a zip in here, and then you can just go back to the marketplace tab and just upload the content pack. I'm not going to do that now. Of course, everything has extremely detailed guides. Moving forward, this is the install. Let's talk about the 4 ways to ingest IOCs into your XSOAR. I'm going to start with the easiest one. For investigations, you're connecting your EDR, your security, your SIEM into your XSOAR, and whichever indicators you can see, this is the default layout. If you use non-out-of-the-box layout or a specific layout, of course, it may look a bit different. But each and every indicator as that appears in the investigation is being extracted, and we also enrich it. We run it across the TI platforms that you have configured within XSOAR. So you can see here domain, URL, and file. They were not found in any of my threat intelligence configured products, so the verdict is unknown. Let's look at another investigation. This is from Proofpoint. Let's see if it has any indicators. Seems like we do. Let's go maybe to the war room. It's a bit busy. So what we can do is we can click on the indicators in the indicator summary of the incident. So we would be able to go into the full layout of the indicator to, of course, get more information. So this is one option. Second option is using files. So 1 second. I'm using a different server that would be able to connect to the PanOS device, hence it is not in our official lab. 1 second. The second option is extract the indicators from a file. So if your organization transfers indicators from the NOC, from the IT department, or from any other departments, what you can do is also attach a document to the investigation, and attach a doc to the investigation. So in here I have, I just have an MS Word document, and I'm going to use the out-of-the-box automation in order to extract them, and of course get more indicators into my threat intel. So that's the second one. Of course, this automation only merely extract the indicators. In order to get the reputation, you would need to have a threat intel product configured. So that's the second one. The third one, the feeds, is only available using XSOAR team license. This is, for example, an RSS feed, but I actually want to show you a different kind of feed. Let's talk about the abuse CHSSL blacklist feed. So this is a feed that contains IP addresses by a free organization by abuse. And you can see that I've pulled it in the last hour or so, almost 8K indicators. It took me 53 seconds. And that's it. We can see that the indicator's reputation is malicious. The reliability is usually reliable. And as you can see, I've added a tag to those IPs. The tag is EDL underscore IP underscore blocklist. Why it is important. Let's talk beforehand about the last bullet, the option to ingest indicators manually. I know that sometimes across investigations and the SOC life, indicators are being created manually. I highly suggest to take those, I would say, options extremely carefully, as usually, as we say in XSOAR, whatever is being done manually is bound to be broken. This is why we automate everything. And this is, of course, the last way, as it is manual. It takes much more time to ingest indicators in the thousands or tens of thousands. Okay, so let's talk about tagging the indicators and creating different externally dynamic lists. So as you can see in here, some of the indicators have different tags that the sources have been bringing with them. So for example, the malware bazaar feed tagged those files as exe, and other tags that may be related to the threat actor or to the campaign coming in with them, which is completely fine, or to the specific attack, the PowerShell keylogger, well-known one. But you can also add your own tags to indicators. So let's look at two of my saved queries. Let's look at blocklist IPs. So as you can see in here, I have IP or CIDRs, which the verdict is malicious. They have a tag, EDL IP blocklist, and expiration status active. Let's talk two things. One, IPs, as you know, are rotating every 2 or 3 weeks, depending who you ask and in which region. I extremely and highly suggest to have an expiration status set on all of your indicator types. So as you can see, those indicators are expired on October 25. It is in, if I recall correctly, it's in this tab. We provide our out-of-the-box suggestion based on our security architects and SMEs that we have in the organization. So for example, for IPs, it's 90 days. For, I don't know, for hashes, of course, it's going to be never expire. This is, of course, changeable. I don't need to detach in order to change that. I highly suggest to make sure that those configurations are set properly within your organization. Okay, so that's the expiration status. And now let's talk about the tags. Basically, tags allows you much more granular management of your indicators within your organization, and allows you to keep track of what is coming in from which feeds or manually or from which investigations, and allows you much more granularity when you're creating the EDLs. So as you can see, I'm going to the generic export indicator service, and I've created in here two instances. The first instance, called EDL underscore instance underscore one, has the same query that you see in here, which has almost 8K indicators. And I've done it in a specific format, which is called PanOS text. Maybe I'll just start it and say that there are many fields and parameters to this integration. I'm not going to cover all. We have documentation for that. Maybe I'm just going to go a little bit on the tips that I want to share with you. We have a default list size of 50K. That's the default. Of course, you can make it bigger. I think that we tried internally up to 500,000 without any issues, but this is basically a safeguard. Of course, we suggest to have different lists per indicator type and per reputation, so you can have much more granular rules within your firewall and EDR. As you can see, each generic export indicator service, EDL hosted on XSOAR, has a listen port. It starts from 9,000 and goes up to 12 to the 16, if I recall correctly, which gives you more than enough EDLs than you need. Of course, it can also run on an engine if you need to host the EDL on a specific engine, so you'll be able to reach a different environment. Of course, we also support different kinds of authentication. Okay, so as you can see, this is the list, and there is, I think, one more documentation that I wanted to share with you, which is wanted to show you this. At the troubleshooting section, I made sure that the instance execute external EDL instance one is set to true. We do that so we would not expose many port and paths within XSOARs to attackers, and make sure that our service is secure. So as part of the documentation, when setting up the EDL, we also recommend, of course, following the documentation to its fullest to make sure that you have everything correctly configured. Okay, so going back to the instance, EDL instance one, I have prepared in advance EDL instance one, and here you can see a lot of lines. It does seem to be a little bit like the emerging threats block list. Of course, it's not by coincidence. Whatever is with asterisk is commented out and not been ingested by the majority of tools, including the firewall that I'm going to showcase today. Going back. Okay, so we have one list. What am I doing with this list, right? So again, I wanted to show it on one working product. I choose PanOS as one of our customers is using, XSOAR customers is using PanOS as their firewall of choice. Of course, it can work with many different others firewalls. The firewall that you're going to see here today is a lab one. It's not a real firewall. It's not a real environment. So if some of the configuration seems off, and when you look at it, it's probably the reason. I've configured a firewall 8.1, the most used. Upgrading firewall is a hard problem, and that's it. Okay, I've created using the integration. I'm not going to run the commands, but I've created a PanOS create EDL. I created an EDL object in the firewall with everything that needs to be added to it. I'm going to show it to you right now. So go into objects, external dynamic list, and EDL webinar malicious IPs. You can see that the source is exactly the same URL that I've been showing you in here. And I've done the frequency, the refresh rate to be every 5 minutes. I haven't done any certificate profile due to the our lab requirements, but of course it is possible. As you can see, there are 7,827 list entries in here, which are the same as we have in our EDL. And I'm being, okay, one item, of course, you can create exclusions within it. I want to show you one more tag, talk about the use of it. So this is an IP list. I've done a more demo-ish one and not extremely full domain block list, which has 3 different domains. As you can see, 2 of them, doc.staturl.com, notamalware.com, and the notoriously a bit suspicious asterisk.com. It's not a domain, it's domain globe. I know, we're going to talk about it soon. As you can see in my EDL instance, I have a second instance for domain. Domain verdict malicious, expiration status active. It's a different list and import, of course. I did a different list size just for the hang of it. And as you can see in the threat intelligence, right, I have 3 items from this query. But when I look at the instance itself, I have only 2. Let's talk about it in a few minutes. Okay, so we ingested the indicators, we tagged them, we created different lists with different EDL objects within the firewall. Let's validate it. Let's make sure that the malicious IPs, right, that I've fetched from a feed and that I have in my XO hosted EDL and that I have in my, in our case, EDL object within the firewall, which is connected, of course, to a rule. Here's the rule that has a source of EDL webinar malicious IPs. We do catch that, and this is an extremely important tip. I highly suggest to have an automated workflow that whenever an item is being added or redacted from a list, to use the PanOS security policy match command. So you would be able to check if the traffic was being caught by a rule. I want to add that if you're hosting the EDL on an engine, because the firewalling is in a different network, you would also need to host the PanOS integration on an engine as well. So this is an important one, and this is, I think, an extremely good usage of it, because sometimes we add or remove items from our EDLs, and it doesn't even have an effect, right? Because we have a different, I don't know, allow rule, which is coming in, and we're adding items to there, or maybe a different team is adding items into there. So I highly suggest, whenever making modifications to the EDL, have a quick check, right? You don't need to commit the firewall instance, and it takes no effort, especially having it automated. Okay, so that's the validation. So we have achieved success, right? It took not very long, I think. We're talking roughly for 30 minutes. I've configured integrations from our XO ever-growing marketplace, ingested indicators from files, from feeds, from investigations, and I've pushed them into an EDL, configure the rule in the firewall, and now you can see that the traffic is actually caught by this rule. So we're secure. But let's make sure to set up for a success, not in a webinar, but in real life. there are a few questions, I think, that we need to ask ourselves before we do that. The first one is, which systems do I want to push indicators of compromise to? Which systems do I want to look at the EDL hosted on Excel and grab those IOC from? Why it is important? The PanOS, for example, I think it's in here, the 8.1, which is EOL, has a limit of how many? 50K IPs, 50K URLs and domains. Again, the specific hardware model. But if, say, you're also pushing it to MSDE or to Curator, they may have different amount limitation on the amount of records that can be pushed into that, and that can put you in kind of a hassle that you don't know why EDLs that you see in the list in Excel are not being blocked or allowed if you're making an allow list in your third-party integrations. So it's extremely important to think of it in advance about the system I'm working with, in which networks they are, what are their limitations, what are their refresh rates of the EDL itself. Is it good enough for me? I think it's also important to talk what are my sources of indicators of compromise. Is it coming in from feeds? Is it coming from manually created IOCs? Is it coming from text files? Do I trust those feeds, right? Maybe I don't trust malware or bazaar. And I think that some of the IPs that are deemed as malicious over there are not really malicious to the opinion of my organization. And then I'm blocking valuable traffic for my organization that is problematic for me to conduct research with. How do you want to manage your list? Usually allow lists and block lists, but there are a lot of attendants on this list, and each and every one is a different company with different needs, different regulations, different geos, and different tolerance to risk. So I think it's also extremely important to, in advance, to plan the EDLs. Do you want them to be per region, per severity, per IOC type, probably per IOC type, as it's also related to the limitations of the third parties products that you push the EDLs to. Also, let's talk about RBAC. So we have integration permissions, and some of the commands can be not intentionally, but can be harmful. For example, some of our customers do not update the EDL automatically. They update it only on demand, which means that whenever they run the export indicators list update command, then and only then the EDL is being updated per their query. In this case, usually what happens, there's a specific companies and they have, of course, different tolerance to risk. And in this case, we extremely suggest to use the integration command permissions feature and limit what kind of role is able to change or create which integration commands. Okay. So basically, if I need to say it in one word, think before you implement, think before you put time and effort into creating those EDLs in your organization. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about continue being successful, and the most important part, at least in my opinion. Let's talk about using safeguards. So here's an example, a real example, financial Americas-based customers that created instead of a few letters and an asterisk.com, he added the asterisk instead of just having the letters .com, and now all of the traffic in, not all of the traffic, but a lot of the traffic in his organization was blocked. There was no the customers were not able to get access to the financial services, and took them a lot of time to unfold and find to do an RCA and find the root cause. So this is the example that I also have prepared for you today. As you can see, I have 3 domains in here. One of them is actually a domain globe, the asterisk.com, but as you've seen, it is not part of the EDL that I've created, even though the query in here and the query in my instance are the same. Are they exactly the same? The reason for this is that we, XO, have built into the integration safeguards by SMEs, both from the PanW SOC and from the Strata organization, to make sure to find solution to the most, I would say, common failures that customers have. One of them is exclude top-level domains. This is one of the reasons that this integration has many integration parameters. It basically excludes them. So even though an analyst or a feed that you're using or any other may create a mistake by entering a globe domain, it will not appear in the EDL or hosted on XO. Hence, it would not appear on the EDL object on the firewall. Hence, it will not block all of the traffic from your organization. The second disaster that I want to talk about is a JPAC-based customer that missed a 1 when he was writing the CIDR of an IP, and instead of having just a few free bits, he got a dozen, and is feeling at home alone. And we have a safeguard for this as well. Let me show you that. Do not know if I use the same indicator or not. Let's check that. So the type is CIDR, malicious. Okay, so here's the malicious one. I've created it manually. As you can see, there are a lot of free bytes over there. As you can see, I've created it manually, which may suggest an error. But if I'm going to the EDL created in here, I'm not seeing it, even though, again, block list IPs, it is the same. Let me show you that it is. It is appearing in the. It is appearing in the threat intel. The reason for this is, once again, that we have a safeguard. This time, the safeguard is related to. Sorry, I'm gonna find it quickly. IP. Maximum CIDR network prefix bits size. So this is a bit of a harsher limitation, but we didn't want to put it as a hard constraint, a hard default. But judging RFC protocols and the SMEs from the Strata organization, they have suggested 16 as the maximum CIDR network prefix bit size, and not different than that. And if there are CIDRs appear in this day, we're going to truncate them for you so they would not appear in the EDL. Of course, there are many other safeguards that I haven't prepared in advance for you, as our time is lacking. We can drop invalid URL entries, as they used to just ignore the entire entries if one of them was invalid. And there are extremely others, different and various safeguards and items that we are adding, stripping the ports or the protocols to align with other products which are not PanOS. And of course, we're happy to get feedback and additions needed to be able to have more safeguards in it. We want to have you covered. So even if a manual indicators is created, which is not valid, your organization would not suffer from it. Use tags, as I've said, gives you much more granularity and control over the list sizes. This one, have a fail check mechanism. I think this is an extremely important one. At the early days of XSOAR, I've talked with a different financial institute, not the one mentioned in here, and we talked a little bit about EDLs and how they manage their indicators lifecycle within XSOAR. And he told me that the most important thing that he's doing is that if there is a fail, right? If let me show you that. He had created, again, this is in here just an example, but he had it the same. He had a list of extremely important assets that he had that need to have communication to at all times. So of course, you can add them to the allow list, which is great, and just have them there. But I think what is even stronger is have them in a list within XSOAR. And as I've demonstrated with the PanOS security policy match, try to reach them and make sure that you reach the allow rule. And if you don't reach the allow rule, if you get a drop or a deny, block, whatever rule, I think it should be, again, this is what he told me, it's not an investigation from a cybersecurity perspective, but it is a business critical alert. As XSOAR and the cybersecurity industry in general, our goal is to provide continuity to the business. I think it is also important to make sure that you can conduct your businesses without compromising on security. So it should be a business critical alert. But again, that's a personal opinion. The last one, as my wife says, you need to commit to the process, right? If you're using an EDL, you're using an EDL. You're not creating just another rule with an hard-coded IP over it, or having EDL in XSOAR and also on a remote file server and syncing both into the same firewall or EDR. You need to have a single source of truth. You need to commit to the process, even if it takes more time in the beginning. Okay, let's talk a little bit about frequently asked questions. Can I use this, the EDL, if I'm already using dynamic address groups, custom URL categories in production? You definitely can, but I think that it is easier to transition to an EDL per type first and start with maybe just one type of indicators, say IPs first, and do the transition slowly at your own pace. Make sure that you're familiar and committed to the process. And if you are in any doubt, feel free to schedule a session with your CSA. Is it supported for multi-tenancy? Of course, the only difference will be the configuration and propagation from the main tenant to the tenants. Same principles do apply. Are there memory or latency expected? So again, it's possible. Every instance is different. Every network is different. every volume of EDL is also affected by the amount of incidents that you have, playbooks that you have, and how many tasks those playbooks contain. One of the things that we find out that exporting all of the IOCs field, let me show you that, exporting all of the IOCs field in here, exportable fields, may cause latency because there is a lot of information in our threat intel. Where am I? In our threat intel library, but you do not need all of it when you create an EDL. You need to make it as lean as possible, so the ingestion time to your product's firewall EDR is going to be as fast as possible. Again, design and assess the number in each list and try to use different lists for different types and verdicts. Many ports available, so not a problem. We got it working up to 500,000 IOCs on a standard server. Of course, you can always use non-standard if needed. Okay. I see more questions at the Q&A. I'm gonna take them as well. And if there are any other questions that you want to take, feel free to reach out to Renee and ask her to unmute. How can we go to the go-to page window? Okay. I have a Mac, and that's Command K. Actually, pretty candidly, it's extremely known feature. So if I'm going to GitHub, let's go to the Mr. Content open repository. Command Ks allow you to open a search. So it's a quite common feature. Questions number 2, do not have engines and firewalls, cannot access internal engine. Is there a way we can save the EDL in a S3 bucket and firewall can read it from there? As you can see, just from the questions in here, every customer environment is different. So there are possibilities to do that. What you can do is have your S3 bucket reach to the EDL configured on your XSOAR and grab that. And then again, of course, the firewall is going to read the EDL from the bucket. Of course, as much as there are many, I would say, people or systems in the lines, you have more points of failure. But again, every organization and its needs. Please describe sticks. Sticks is a well-known format that holds indicator, which we of course support. It's an open one. I don't want to go into all of the details now, but feel free to search it online. We do support ingesting indicators in a sticks format from our taxi feeds. Of course, some of the product packs, I think Alien Vault field is holding those in taxi format. I think that also the Unit 42 is in a taxi format, if I recall correctly. Extremely known one. And of course, you can upload integration indicators and extract them in a sticks format as well. Taking more questions for later. Bar, can you make a comment on HA EDL, please? Load balancing engine does not do high availability since it's an incoming web service, and to do HA EDL, then customers should set up load balancers like F5 that round robin requests, which can automatically survive a single engine failure hosting the EDL. That's an extremely technical question. I would say that with the plans and movage of XSOAR and the specification of it, I think that some of the more inherently issues regarding the round robin and the AJ of engines would solve themselves. I don't want to go into the bits and pieces of the most complicated and age availability needs, but I would do say this is something that XSOAR has on its roadmap, and that of course also includes the EDLs. One option to solve it is to have the EDL only on update only on demand. Can we also talk about the differences of using a single EDL instance and using queue features in URL parameter to minimize complexity of potentially needed dozens of XSOAR EDL instances? There's a complete query language there's a complete query language that allows you to retrieve the indicators from the systems that you can do from within the URL to save both time and effort. And there's also recommendation with NG-INX, which hosts the EDLs that allowed some of our customers to extremely scale. I would love to talk more about this, but I think that time is lacking, and as the majority of customers don't have 500 plus firewalls, would have to save it for the next webinar. Does the EDL leverage XSOAR exclusion lists in any way? An extremely good one. Let's try it out. So let's say that let's look for an IP for a block list. Domain, and let's exclude it. So we're gonna delete, and we're gonna add the inclusion rate. This IOC is good. We're gonna select indicator type and say it's a domain. I know it's not a domain, but and we are adding it to exclusion list. And now let's just refresh and see if this indicator is still here. One more second. All times. Test. And save, and to the best of my knowledge, it should have been removed, and it is removed. Do note, as the refresh time rate, I think in here is 5 minutes. I haven't seen it just at the neck of time, so I had to press test one more time. Great. I would love to take more questions, but we're at the top of the hour, and I know that I can go and talk on for hours, but I value your time and the commitments that you have after this call. I want to thank you so much for joining in this webinar, participating, asking questions. I hope that you have gained information and knowledge from it, and we would love if you can help us improve your experience by providing us feedback. Thank you so much, all.